We're here on the interchange from I-65 on the northern bypass where a gasoline tanker containing 8,000 gallons of gasoline jackknifed and overturned. We are told that the driver suffered some injuries and he has been sent to Maxwell Hospital. The situation presently is that gas fumes have spread around this area, which is about a half mile from downtown Montgomery. For about 20 minutes there was the potential for an explosion, but most of the gasoline leaked into a sewer system and officials are not sure where the gasoline went. They're trying to determine whether or not the gasoline went into the Alabama River or maybe it may have gone into another portion of the city's sewer system. Montgomery Police Chief Swindle has called for city units to check the sewer systems and to possibly flood them with water to keep an explosion from occurring because of fumes. As we say, a gasoline tanker truck did overturn here. Chief Swindle is here with me and he can give us an assessment of the situation.
Norman, we have 8,500 gallons of gasoline that's out of this truck now into some part of the sewer system. We think it's in a drain system and not a sanitary sewer. We're pretty sure of it. But the main concern is now that we must get enough water into these systems to flush it out, dilute it, till we don't have ignition downstream somewhere with this, and it follow the path back to the truck here now. And
what is the potential right now?
Well, it's pretty good right now until we can get enough water into the system to dilute it to the point that we don't have any flashback or anything from any ignition downstream.
Thank you very much, Chief. Right now, a tanker truck is trying to pump the remaining gasoline from the truck that overturned. This is Norman Lumpkin reporting live from the I-65 interchange and the northern bypass for WSFA TV News. The interchange is a half mile from downtown Montgomery, where gasoline fumes fill the air for several hours. 5,000 gallons of gasoline poured from several parts of the 90,000-pound gasoline tanker. Firemen using foam and hundreds of gallons of water to try and avoid an explosion that could have killed them and motorists caught in the area. Gasoline poured into a sewer system, creating another deadly problem. Gas fumes in the sewer system that serves this city of 200,000. For a critical 15-minute period, the threat of a disaster grew as fire units ran out of water. Montgomery City Fire Chief James Odom assessed the situation.
Well, we've got an extremely high potential here. We've got about 8,000 gallons of fuel here that's already gone into some kind of drainage system, which we can't get a handle on where it's going to. And we're waiting on sand to dike it to where we can trap it up. But things could develop in a few minutes. It could be very bad.
What is causing the potential for a disaster here right now? Is it just the gasoline flowing? Or
it's because of the gas coming from the overturned tanker, and it's going into this drainage system, and we really don't know where this drainage system is dumping out at this point. That's what's got us worried. We're waiting on the waterworks to get here now with their maps to tell us where it's going to.
Do you have any idea how much water you've used in foam so far? Have you run out?
Not at this time. We're having to shuttle water back and forward. We've used in excess of 1,000 gallons of water already. We've got our additional foam. All the foam that we've got available at this time is on its way here or here, and then we've asked for Maxwell for their assistance with their foam trucks and tankers, and they're on the way in also now. And we're requesting sand from the city to dike this, and hopefully it'll be here in just a few more minutes. We'll have it better under control once we can dike it.
Okay, what about the gasoline that's going out into the system?
We don't know where it's going. We're real concerned about that. At this point, we can get those maps and find out where it's going. We just really don't know. It could be going in the river. It could be dumping down the side of this other interstate. We just really don't know.
We must get enough water into these systems to flush it out, dilute it, till we don't have ignition downstream somewhere with this, and it follow the path back to the truck here now. And
what is the potential right now?
Well, it's pretty good right now until we can get enough water into the system to dilute it to the point that we don't have any flashback or anything from any ignition downstream.
The first 3 compartments on the tanker had been opened and drained, but then there was the potentially dangerous situation of opening the 4th and final compartment. Emergency people were concerned as to whether or not it would explode.
We intend to wrap the truck up with foam inside and out before it's uprighted. It's laying on some post there that has ruptured the sides, so there's bound to be some sparking when it's uprighted.
The last compartment was successfully opened and the gasoline was successfully pumped out without an explosion. Then began the task of uprighting the overturned tanker. Once the tanker was uprighted, the concern among city officials, fire and police, as well as Mayor Emery Farmer, eased. The danger of explosions within the city sewer system was eased because the gasoline was found to be flowing onto a plowed field a few hundred yards away from the accident site. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News on the I-65 Northern Bypass interchange.
City officials say it wasn't the kind of accident you can plan to avoid, but the potentially volatile cargo presented a situation serious enough to test the full resources of the fire and police departments.
Well, this near tragedy we had today on the Northern Bypass could have been much worse. Fortunately, we escaped with just minor injury to the driver, who had lost control of his vehicle. The Montgomery Fire Department and the police department handled themselves with skill and in a very professional manner. They sealed off the area very quickly, put foam on the truck to lessen the likelihood of any fire explosion, very skillfully eliminated the problem by washing down the area and then righting the truck and having it hauled off. It was a very good team effort, and I think we did learn something from it. But it is a kind of accident that can happen again, as many 18-wheel trucks go through and around the city all day.
You really can't plan ahead for that kind of eventuality then.
Well, we're planning ahead all the time, that we've got our crews ready, and we were on the scene shortly, minutes as a matter of fact, after the disaster was noted, and our crews are trained and know how to handle the situation as soon as they arrive. But it's not the kind of thing we'll say that it will happen at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon and we'll be there. It can happen anywhere, at any time, but we'll be ready.
Here at Montgomery City Hall, government leaders are adding that it is comforting to see firemen and policemen going into action in the manner performed today on the Northern Bypass. Dick Bird, WSFA TV News, reporting.
The circuit court jury of 6 men and 6 women announced its verdict of guilty as charged to a packed courtroom. It came following 2.5 days of testimony and about an hour after the jury received the case. The verdict was received in almost complete silence. There were a few quiet comments of, "Oh no, I can't believe that." Mrs. Allen kept her composure. However, she appeared shaken as she rushed from the courtroom immediately after the verdict was read. I saw no tears. Her attorney, Billy Jordan of Columbus, Mississippi, commented briefly about the decision and his future plans.
It's not my office to comment on the verdict of a jury.
Were you surprised of the verdict?
Well, of course, whenever you undertake to represent a client, you try to do your best, and there's always a feeling that possibly there was something that I either did I shouldn't have done, or something I didn't do I should have done.
What will you do now? Will you appeal?
We plan to exhaust all remedies on behalf of eventually vindicating Ms. Allen.
Do you believe a lot of this was politically oriented, the trial?
I have no comments to make on what went on in that trial. That's Judge Hooper's court, and he was very gracious and much of a gentleman, and I enjoyed being in his court.
Judge Perry Hooper had charged the jury to return a verdict of not guilty or guilty as charged. Montgomery District Attorney Jimmy Evans, in asking for a guilty verdict, told the jury a complex case from the outset had now become a simple, very simple situation. Attorney Art Haynes Jr., in a 35-minute closing argument, asked the jury to consider if there was any proof of direct personal gain by the state treasurer in her dealing with state money in state banks. That based on the evidence and law, he implored the jury to return a verdict of not guilty. Attorney Billy Jordan described his client as a fine Christian woman, a mother, a grandmother who has done nothing wrong. Mrs. Allen was charged on a 2-count indictment that she deposited state funds in the American Bank of Geneva, Alabama, in exchange for personal credit or loans. Mrs. Allen could receive a prison sentence of up to 10 years and or a $1,000 fine on both counts. Sentence is to be imposed by presiding Circuit Court Judge Perry Hooper on June the 8th. The defense rested its case at 11:35 this morning after presenting some 25 character witnesses. Chief among those was Governor George Wallace. The governor told the court he has known Mrs. Allen 12, 13, 14 years and considered her reputation in her community, where she lives and where she works, as, quote, good. There were no other questions for Mr. Wallace. Another character witness was State Auditor Betty Frink. She described Mrs. Allen's reputation as most excellent. The other witnesses included numerous employees from the State Auditor's office, the Hopewell community in Montgomery County where Mrs. Allen lives, and other residents in neighboring towns. The general theme of the State Treasurer's character was considered by those who testified this morning as good, very good, and excellent. Again, Melba Till Allen found guilty today and will be sentenced on June the 8th by Montgomery Circuit Court Judge Perry Hooper. Reporting from Montgomery Circuit Court, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
The audit results come after months of reports that the PSC needed more people and more funds. Commission President Juanita McDaniel says the inadequate staffing at the PSC has been and continues to be a serious problem.
When I came with the commission in 1971, we only had 39 employees. I have worked real hard through my tenure on the commission to increase our staff and to get more expertise. Today we do have 60 employees, but we are still extremely understaffed and certainly underfunded. The legislature cut our budget that we asked for next year by $800,000, and this was a big blow to the commission.
Why was the budget cut, and what services would it curtail, or what kind of a hardship would the budget cut put on you?
Well, of course, we can establish new positions through the personnel department, but we have to have money to pay for the expertise when we hire them, and it will limit our hiring. We are going to go ahead and do as much as we can with the funds that we have received, hoping that even in the special session that we will get some more funds for next year.
What is the most critical area do you consider yourself to be overworked and understaffed?
Well, the most critical area in the commission is certainly in the field of utilities. Until 1969, there were very few cases that came before the commission, very few petitions that were filed for rate cases. We all know that in the last few years that we have just been swamped with rate cases, not only from the big companies, but from the small companies too. And when I say the small companies, I'm really thinking more about the independent telephone companies in our state. We have 39, and those people who are served by independent telephone companies want real good telephone service also. So it is in the field of utilities, and as time has as the demand for electricity has grown and as the responsibility to the commission has grown, we just simply do not have the auditors, the engineers, and the analysts that we need, we feel, to do an adequate job in overseeing these utilities.
What kind of money are we talking about you feel would adequately enable you to hire the people you need?
If we could get restored to our budget the $800,000 that was cut, I think that we could certainly begin in a big way in the balance of this year and in 1969. You know, you just can't go out and hire expertise overnight, so we don't plan to hire what we need in just a month or two's time. We know that it will take time to do this, possibly maybe 6 or 8 months or even a year, to really bring the staff up to the place where we would like for it to be.
The auditors from Price Waterhouse have spoken, and now it's up to the members of the Alabama legislature to appropriate adequate funds so that the Public Service Commission will have the proper staff and funding to regulate utilities here in this state. For Composite, this is Norman Lumpkin reporting.
Well, as you know, SALT 2 has been under negotiation since the fall of 1972. So it's now almost 6 years. I'm happy to say that we're now down to literally a handful of remaining issues. We have a joint draft text that during that almost 6-year period has reached over 50 pages, and it's a very comprehensive, I think, well worked out document.
What are we talking about when we say a handful of issues?
Well, we still have issues with regard principally to the nature of the qualitative constraints. As you know, what we're trying to do is to get quantitative limits and reductions in the number of strategic nuclear delivery vehicles. By that I mean those systems that can deliver nuclear weapons at intercontinental ranges. We're also trying to get qualitative restraints which would begin to put a stop to the technological competition, and people would stop developing more and more deadly types of strategic nuclear arms. So that one of the things that remains to be determined is the extent of those qualitative restraints. We would like to see a more dramatic change, more dramatic restrictions than the Soviet Union has yet been willing to accept.
Would continued UN resolutions still be perceived by the Soviet Union as a hindrance to SALT talks?
I don't think that would have any bearing on the SALT negotiations. Now, it happens that the United Nations is about to go into an extraordinary session, a so-called special session on disarmament, which will last from the end of May till the end of June. And unquestionably, one of the subjects that will come up for discussion by the over 150 delegations there is bound to be the U.S.-Soviet arms race, and when are we going to do something about it? And in that sense, sure, I think there'll be resolutions, and I think there'll be a good deal of critical discussion. But it's not my impression that the Soviets or we are going to take that amiss, let's say. I think we are well aware that there is justifiable criticism of the slow pace with which we've been working towards a strategic arms limitation agreement, but I think we're also right not to be rushed by external pressures into doing something that would not be good for our own security, and that, after all, is the bottom line. We're looking for ways in which we can improve our national security through an arms control measure such as the SALT II treaty.
I've found the Soviet negotiators to be forthcoming. They have made a number of compromises. They have moved considerably towards American positions. They never move quite as far as you would like them to move, but I find that's true of any type of negotiation. I have found no arrogance. I think they recognize that we are dealing from a position of strength.
What would be the situation if we had a SALT talk agreement signed tomorrow?
Yeah.
What would our position be in terms of relative strength? Where would we come out?
Well, in our view, it would preserve a strategic balance. And what it would do is to set for the first time the principle of equal aggregates. You remember that in the SALT I agreement, the interim agreement on control of offensive arms, that froze a situation in which the Soviets had more intercontinental ballistic missiles and more ballistic missile submarines than we did. Now, at Vladivostok, President Ford and General Secretary Brezhnev agreed that SALT II would set equal aggregates, so that a SALT II agreement would establish the principle that both sides would be entitled to the same number of strategic nuclear delivery vehicles and the same number of the so-called MIRVed ballistic missiles. Those are the ballistic missiles with multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, which enables one missile to throw several weapons at widely dispersed targets. So it would provide for quantitative equality. It would provide for the same qualitative restraints. It would begin to slow down the tempo of the technological competition. It would ensure a greater degree of strategic stability.
What kind of a check and balance would there be?
The check and balance as far as verification of the agreement is concerned?
Compliance.
I have submitted a report to the Congress giving my view, as required by law, that the SALT agreement, which is taking shape, would in fact be fully adequately verifiable. Now, we have our national technical means of detection. I can't go into these publicly, but they enable us to have a high degree of assurance that we would know whether the Soviet Union was complying with the provisions of the agreement.
What will the fallout of a SALT talk agreement be?
Well, I think that it's hard to predict what all the political benefits of a SALT agreement might be. I think that a lot of our differences with the Soviet Union are going to remain, but I think the fact that we continue an largely unconstrained arms competition makes it more difficult to resolve our other differences with them. Once we get a SALT agreement, there are other arms control areas where we might be able to make better progress than we have to date. I mentioned nuclear proliferation problems before. I think the efforts to ban nuclear testing will obviously take on greater importance and perhaps be made easier by the accomplishment of a SALT treaty. I think also that the negotiations which we're carrying on in a number of other areas, such as trying to find ways to impose some self-restraint on our conventional arms sales policies, may get a boost from the accomplishment of a SALT treaty. We're also looking into ways of controlling or preventing an arms race in space through the anti-satellite talks that we announced will be taking place sometime starting next month. I think all of these things can benefit from accomplishment of a SALT II treaty. Not that they won't be going on anyway, but I think that this will help them.
After SALT, what happens to the arms limitation group? Do they work then with third world nations that are developing weapons systems?
Well, we have a very extensive arms control agenda at the present point. In addition to the SALT talks on strategic nuclear weapons, I have personally been involved in the comprehensive test ban talks, which are trilateral consultations among the British, the Soviets, and ourselves, looking toward a complete cessation of nuclear explosions. Those talks have been going on for about a year, not quite a year, and there is still a great deal of detailed work to be done. We have the ongoing talks on mutual balanced force reductions in Europe. Next month, I will be going to Helsinki to begin talks with the Soviet Union on prohibitions of anti-satellite weapons, to try and prevent a war in space, to try and prevent the kind of activity that could lessen our verification capability. And we have talks with regard to a ban on chemical weapons, talks with regard to prevention of radiological warfare. We have discussions that have been going on restraints on conventional arms transfers, so that there will be plenty to do for the arms control community, even if we are able promptly to reach a SALT II agreement.
I think everyone would agree there's plenty to do.
Yeah.
Philosophically,
Yeah.
are you optimistic about where we are going with arms and where we will be, say, in 20 years from now? Will we be here in 20 years from now? Let me put it that way.
I think that one of the values of SALT has been the educational process that both countries have gone through. I think that we have learned more what one another thinks. I think that the Soviet Union recognizes that we have no intention of attacking them with nuclear weapons. I think, despite some reports to the contrary, that the Soviet leadership recognizes that nuclear war would be suicidal for them. As a consequence, I think that we have come to realize that despite our very many differences, despite the fact that we view the world very differently, we've got different aspirations for developing countries, we have a different concept of human rights, that we do share certain things. We share, for example, a common interest in survival. I think also that it's become clear that the competition will continue, that all we're really talking about at this point is finding some way of dampening down the more dangerous aspects of it.
Well, the dictionary defines de facto as in reality. It's not a fact of law, but it is a real situation. So in this case, when I'm promising de facto home rule, I'm saying that even though the state doesn't have a home rule law, that I will guarantee that as far as local legislation is concerned, unless the governing body of the city and the county are for it, then I'm going to make sure it doesn't pass.
Have there been times when you felt the council was put in a bad position?
Oh, yes. This is what's given me the idea, Clark. So many nights we've had certain members of the state legislature, local delegation, come before us and threaten us, coerce us, downright blackmail us on an issue, saying, if you don't pass this, then I'm going to introduce this bill in the legislature, a general bill, and we'll force it on you. Or conversely, we've had dissident city councilmen who have lost an issue and make the statement right from the council bench saying that, you know, well, this issue isn't over yet. I've got friends in the legislature, and I'll have it put in as a general bill of local application, and we'll have this mayor's increase or something. That's the latest one, when one of the council members tried to pass a council ordinance that would have, excuse me, a amendment to the law that would have increased the salary of the mayor, and of course it was defeated by the council. And the statement was made that, well, I'm going to the legislature with this. Well, I can't keep those statements from happening, but I can certainly guarantee everybody in the city of Montgomery that none of those blackmail laws are going to pass. None of those bills will ever have a chance of passing.
I was coming southbound, and there was a loader in the right-hand lane, and there was a car behind him. And just as we approached the bridge, the car fell out in left-hand lane pass. And I fell out in left-hand lane pass. Well, we all started on the bridge, and a fella in the left-hand lane stopped. And when he stopped, I couldn't stop. I moved back over behind the loader in the right-hand lane, and there was just enough room between the loader and the car for me to go through. And when I went through, I ran off the corner of the bridge.
Were you hurt at all?
No, sir.
Can you remember your thoughts as you went off this portion of the bridge?
All I could do was think I was just hang on.
Edward Oliver was driving the tanker when, according to him, something went wrong mechanically, and the tanker jackknifed, flipping the tons of metal and thousands of gallons of gasoline onto the median along the northern bypass. Oliver says he's being accused by some media officials of causing the more than 3-hour state of emergency that existed here yesterday. The situation was composed of gas fumes hanging over the area, thousands of gallons of gas pouring into a sewer, and firemen exposed to the danger of being burned alive in an explosion. Everything is back to normal today, but Montgomery Mayor Emery Farmer says it was a tense, dangerous situation and that he's glad it ended well. Farmer says there's no way to avoid such accidents because of the heavy amount of truck traffic in and around the city of Montgomery.
It was a very good team effort, and I think we did learn something from it. But it is a kind of accident that can happen again as many 18-wheel trucks go through and around the city all day.
You really can't plan ahead for that kind of eventuality then.
Well, we're planning ahead all the time, that we've got our crews ready, and we were on the scene shortly, minutes as a matter of fact, after the disaster was noted, and our crews are trained and know how to handle the situation as soon as they arrive. But it's not the kind of thing we'll say that it will happen at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon and we'll be there. It can happen anywhere, at any time, but we'll be ready.
At one point during the battle to avoid an explosion yesterday, a man drove up somehow getting through roadblocks in the area. He was smoking a king-sized cigarette, apparently not realizing the situation. He was quickly pounced upon by bystanders who put out the cigarette. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
And if you see fit to elect me, with God's help, I'll serve you well. I've been very lucky. I mean, when you win this many at medal play, there's got to be not a little bit of luck, but I feel a great deal of luck.
You feel like the Rolling Hills tournament really was the best of the tournaments you've won around town?
Well, I was real fortunate and real happy at winning Bonnycrest and Rolling Hills because it's such a great golf course, just a great golf course. It's in such good condition. Championship golf course, whenever you win on that type golf course, you got to feel happy.
Now, with the Woodley coming up this weekend, how come nobody shoots any low numbers at you?
Well, I believe it's because the greens get tough to putt with. Usually Woodley gets a pretty good field. By good field, I mean a lot of players, and this many players walking around the hole that you're trying to get the putt in. I feel that it gets just chewed up. Plus, the OB kind of moves in about 15, 20 more yards in a tournament than it does just playing around.